Hey there, and welcome. I'm sorry, wrong introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be hailing from. This is Red Hat Enterprise Linux Presents. I'm your host, Eric the IT Guy Hendricks, and joining me is the illustrious, the amazing Mr. Brian Smith.
Hey Eric, how are you doing today?
I'm in a mood. I don't know what kind of mood, but maybe we'll find out by the end of the episode.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Yeah, we have an awesome episode for today.
Yeah, so today we're going to be revisiting a topic we've talked about in the past. We've talked about Podman Desktop, and we'll explain what that is here in a minute. But there's a new extension for Podman Desktop, and has to do with AI Lab. So we've all been hearing how AI is in everything. I swear I saw a pair of tennis shoes that had AI built into the soles. I don't know, but AI is eating the world. And so on this show, we wanted to have a couple of episodes around what is AI actually, and kind of debunk some of the myths. And so we decided before we kind of talked about what AI is, we were thinking it might make more sense if we talked about how to actually run it on something other than a chat GPT or out on the cloud where you're spending thousands of dollars a month on a GPU. So we reached out to our friends that are developing Podman Desktop, and a couple of them, well, they actually like volunteered each other. So there's a lot of finger pointing. And then two people drew the short straws. So with that said, why don't we bring on our guests? We'll do some introductions and then we'll dive into the meat of our topic today.
Welcome.
Hey
So we've got
guys.
Cedric
Hello.
and Stefan today. So Cedric, you've got the more interesting background. Let's start with you. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us where you're at, and then tell us what you do and what you do for fun.
Well, thank you guys, and it's an honor to be on the show. My name is Cedric Clyburn. I'm a developer advocate at AI at Red Hat, and I focus now on AI. And I'm speaking to you from the lovely Las Vegas. I'm currently at Black Hat 2024, so the security focused conference for I guess one of the biggest conferences in North America for security. And so maybe we'll even talk a little bit about AI and security when building applications today. But I come from North Carolina, and I'm a big mountain biker. I love hiking, and I love playing some retro games. So I'm a big Quake guy.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, so funny enough, Black Hat actually has no relation to Red Hat, which I think is hilarious. But Red Hat is present at Black Hat, so there's probably a joke there somewhere. So Stefan, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you do and what you do for fun?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us today in the show. It's really a pleasure. So my name is Steven Lemer. I'm a product manager working on developer tools, and I'm focusing primarily on Podman Desktop and all the different extensions that we have for Podman Desktop. And lately, I've been messing around with LLMs quite a lot, but otherwise, I like doing anything that is related to water. So kite surfing, swimming, open water swims, and things like that. So, yeah.
Very cool. Well, let's start by there might be some people watching who have not heard of Podman Desktop before. Can one of you just provide a quick summary? Like what is Podman Desktop? What are your common use cases that you might want to use Podman Desktop for?
People like Brian who haven't installed it.
Yeah, but maybe you have not heard about Podman Desktop, but you probably have been hearing about Podman, in fact. So Podman Desktop is this graphical interface that we are providing on top of Podman that allows to simplify managing and working with containers for a developer. It's a tool that is available on all the different platforms, so Windows, Mac, and Linux, of course. And yeah, its goal is really to provide an easy way to work with both containers, but also with Kubernetes. So it's all about making it more accessible for the developers to work with the containers, to containerize their application, to testing their applications that are running into containerized environment, and also pulling images that can help them to spin up services locally, like databases and things like that. But it's also all about helping the developers to work with Kubernetes. So it's really about this transition of containers to pods, because pods are running with Podman, and also with Kubernetes. So you can spin up a local Kubernetes environment, or just use the great capabilities of Podman to work with Kubernetes objects locally. And yeah, all of this is all about simplifying the experience and the transition from your application up to production. There is also a big aspect which is related to the discrepancies. In fact, when you are working in a developer environment, and when you are looking at the way your application is going to run onto production, how do you minimize the discrepancies? And how do you make sure that the artifacts that you build as a developers are going to be consistent with your production environment? So that's the goal of Podman Desktop.
Yeah, Podman Desktop has grown so much, and it's really ingenious, because if you think about running containers on Linux, Podman is native to Linux. So it's just native native operation. It's basically just a really nice UI on top of Podman. But in Mac and Windows, it actually spins up a Linux virtual machine that that then runs Podman. So it makes it easy for a developer who has a Mac, a developer who has Windows, and a developer that's running Linux to share the same images and do development locally on their machine. It's really amazing. And then on top of that, excuse me, you may run containers on a RHEL system or on Fedora, or as a production workload. But the nice thing is, like you mentioned, Podman also has the ability, Podman Desktop, sorry, also has the ability to manage Kubernetes pods, or even spin up Kubernetes or OpenShift locally. So you kind of get the best of all the worlds and be able to develop locally and then deploy remotely for development to production. It's really an amazing way to interact with containers, to manage your images. But Cedric, I see you nodding your head vigorously? Was there you want to add to that a little bit?
Well, I was going to say, so I started kind of my career here at Red Hat, and when I was an intern, Podman looked a lot different. So I had to spin up a Linux machine, and I had to install Podman, and then I could work with my containers. And what I think is really fascinating is that since my time here in the past few years, there's been huge developments with Podman 4 and Podman 5 recently to make it easier to set up a machine, a VM on your system, say the Mac that we're going to see the demos with today, to run those containers. And there's been a lot of progress, and that's kind of part of Stevan and his team's work to make the flow much simpler and smoother for developers who want to work with containers and Kubernetes, and especially with the AI Lab part too. But I just love to see how crazy the growth has been with Podman, because it's really become such a nice and practical tool for working with containers. I don't have to think about. I mean, personally, it's a discussion of, hey, do you like using Vim or do you like using VS Code? I'm on the latter side of that. I like a nice user interface, and I think Podman Desktop really fits that kind of sweet spot.
So we did do a previous episode of RHEL Presents. Was about maybe a year ago or so, and it looks like Eric just linked that in the chat here. So if you want more information on on Podman Desktop, definitely check out our previous show where we had a lot of detail. But one thing we wanted to cover just real briefly is, since the time of the show, I think we've had a new version of Podman Desktop released, and new versions of Podman, etc. Can you give us the highlights of what's new recently?
Yeah, so since last year, the product has been really growing a lot. We have been adding a lot of capabilities, and the adoption you mentioned, the adoption. I am happy to see that we have happy users here, but we are above 1 million downloads for the tool.
Oh
So
wow, that's amazing.
yeah,
1 million
and
downloads.
so it's quite impressive to see how much interest there is for the tool and the solution. So it's pretty cool. Podman has been also doing a lot of work, and the version 5, which introduced the support for the native hypervisors for both Mac and Windows, has been huge as well. So it really makes things more mature and having better stability, better performances. So it really improves the experience. And within Podman Desktop, we've been able to leverage this to create a smoother onboarding experience. So now when you install Podman Desktop for the first time, we are better guiding you into setting up the environment, getting it up and running. As you explained, Eric, it's all about creating this Linux environment on Mac or on Windows to be able to work with the containers, and this is now much smoother. And another area of focus has been on the Kubernetes features. So we've been adding quite a lot of capabilities. So now you have more UI to interact with Kubernetes objects as well. And there's always a ton of effort that is going through the UX to make it nicer. We are getting actually a lot of feedback from users, so that's a good source for us of improvements and things that we can have a direct impact on the users. So that's really good. And yeah, I think since last year we have been having at least 10 releases. So we try to push releases quite oftenly. So this way, there's new features and new capabilities that are getting exposed to the end users. And one new thing that is coming, which is actually available on as an experimental feature, is a light mode, which has been asked quite oftenly by the community. And there's other things that are coming, like the ability to connect to a Podman remote host, which was highly demanded as well, is coming in. So we've been maturing the product. We've been adding these capabilities to handle more extension, to bring more capabilities for the extension to add new capabilities to the product as well. So yeah, it's really fun to work on it, and to see the adoption and to see the feedback from the users as well.
Well, and something to point out is a tool this complete, that is growing this quickly, you would think would have a price tag to it. It actually doesn't. It's open source. It's available. It's multi-platform, and you can go and download it right now. In fact, we'll see if we can pull up the link to the homepage, but it's available now. You can download it, and it doesn't cost you a penny. It's amazing. So we want to kind of revisit Podman Desktop for a few minutes. But now I'm wanting to do something I try to avoid on podcasts, and we're going to do a hard pivot right now. So kind of take all the information about Podman Desktop, set it off to the side for about 15 minutes or so, because I want to do a hard pivot and talk about now. I'm not talking about Skynet. I'm not talking about artificial intelligence. I'm talking about AI as it exists today in the industry. And a huge part of a huge part of AI in the industry is developing and building LLMs, large language models, training your AI model, interacting with that model. Um, And shameless self-promotion, but I actually met JJ Asgar, who works for IBM Research, and he and his team have partnered very strongly with Red Hat and on Instruct Lab. So before we dive into what all of that means, I do this every time I have a conversation. Anytime people ask me questions, or anytime I'm asking questions about AI, let's level set here. Let's set the expectation. We're not talking evil robots taking over the world just yet. That may be later in the episode. But for now, let's talk about what is AI, and let's start by defining what is an LLM.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think not necessarily it's a pivot, because when we talk about and show AI Lab today, the Podman AI Lab extension for Podman Desktop, it does enable you to use these LLMs, and so at the same time, it's really important to understand AI and specifically what generative AI is. So a lot of us have been using AI for years, for a decade at least, in predictive search. When I go into Google and I type "what is," the rest of it is autocomplete. And so there's a lot of different ways. Financial transactions, when I apply for a credit card, and maybe if I get rejected, that was AI's fault. So, we see AI all the time, and what's been really, really astounding in the past year is that the barrier to entry into using AI as a developer, as a common user, as a student, even when I was taking my courses, was much lowered by the popular models that are out there like ChatGPT. But in terms of what AI is, we're working with these large language models specifically with Podman AI Lab, essentially trained on a huge amount of data from the open web, from different repositories and sources of data, to kind of be a predictor. So if I say "what is blank," we'll be able to predict the next token by the relevance of and prediction of weights and biases in a model, and how likely it is for the next word to be predictive. And we can mess around with that with model's temperature, which we'll take a look at. But essentially, I kind of want a level set of what is AI and what is LLMs, and how do we use them every day? Because I think whether we're developers or sysadmins or just anyone in general, we're all affected by AI in one way or another. And so that Instruct Lab project you just talked about is kind of the way to democratize AI, in the fact that I, as a non-data scientist, am able to contribute to a model and provide those contributions upstream. And another thing I kind of wanted to bring up is what is open source AI? So when I talked about those contributions to open source and how I would generally push that up, say if it's the Podman Desktop project, my contributions to an open source project can be adopted upstream, and that kind of brings innovation and allows everyone to contribute and build and create the future, right? So with open source AI, it's a little bit different, because we've kind of heard the conception of, hey, these are open source models, in the fact that you can use them, you can make money from them in your applications, commercialize them. But there's one small difference in the fact that we are able to use the models, right? We can download them, we could use them, we can use them in web services, we can use them locally, which we'll be doing today. But we don't have access to how they were trained. We don't understand the weights of some of these popular models. Thus, we don't understand the data that was also used to train the models. And there's a variety of other considerations. That's not necessarily what we would traditionally define as open source. While you can use these popular AI models, we don't exactly know what's going on behind the scenes. And that's why there's a lot of concern right now in the industry about security and risk. And if I use a model, am I going to get the correct output every single time? Because we kind of have a degree of uncertainty in what's going on behind the scenes. There's kind of this black box. And so one of the models that we're going to show today is this Granite model that was a partnership between IBM and Red Hat that was released at Red Hat Summit, where you can actually see the training data. It's released on Apache 2.0 license, so it's very openly permissible. And I think it's really important as we go forward to kind of understand, hey, how are these models going to react and give outputs based on their training, their architecture, and kind of what biases went into training these popular open source models. So that's my little spiel about AI and what it means when we're talking about AI, specifically this generative AI that's going to help us build applications that's going to be used locally on my machine or maybe in a production cluster. And so we'll kind of see a little bit of the magic here today. But that's my little spill.
Very
And
cool.
that's hugely important. I mean, you think about everything is mining your data nowadays. Every time you go to a website, every time you do a search, and you have to constantly opt in cookies and all this other stuff. And I mean, now if I install an app on my phone, it immediately wants to ask if it can track me and track all my usage. So being able to see what data is going into that model really helps understand the safety of not just building it, but also utilizing it. How accurate is the data? What materials are being used to train the data? So it's not just is the model itself open source, but is the data open source?
Well said. Yeah, I agree. And the whole idea that we've kind of pioneered in the past, however many years with open source is like, how do we apply those same open source methodologies to model creation, but also model development, just the same way that we're doing.
Oh no! I thought we were going to be all right.
Sorry, I cut out. No, I was saying it's the whole idea of the methodology that we have for open source that we've been using to build open source software in the past however many years, that needs to be applied to model development, the same software development principles that we use.
So Red Hat's been doing a lot of work on this new Podman desktop extension called AI Lab. Can one of you explain, what exactly is the AI Lab extension for Podman desktop?
Yeah, so the AI Lab extension is something that you can install inside of Podman Desktop that is really all about making it easier for the developers, to build, test, and run generative AI application powered by containers. But all of this with an easy and intuitive graphical interface, and all of this running on your local workstation. So it's something that you install locally, and from AI Lab, you will have the ability to run large language model. You will have the ability to start interacting with those models, but also doing the inferencing, which is really all about opening an endpoint for interacting with the model and being able to start wrapping the source code of your application with this endpoint. So and when we start to build a Podman AI Lab, in fact we start to look at the different challenges for the developers to work with AI. And I don't know if you will agree, but in general, before Gen AI, when developers were looking at working with AI, it was all about doing Python, and it was all about doing Jupyter notebooks and things like that. But with Gen AI, everything changed, in fact. And now an LLM is basically a new service in your application, and you have to interact with this service. So how do we help the application developers to start bringing AI inside of their existing application? How can we provide them guidance and learning resources so that they can start to experiment with AI? And instead of waiting for an infrastructure to run the models, which could be coming at a high cost as well, it's all about leveraging the resources, the hardware resources of the laptop of the developers as well. So you want to provide an environment for the developers which is safe, where they can experiment safely, without putting trade-off on on any sensitive data. You want to remain owner of your data, but you also still want to tie this into your overall application development story, which is all about containers and running those application on top of Kubernetes platforms, for example. So that's really where we have been coming from. And then we look at the journey for the developer, in fact. It's starting from the ideation. It's how can I evaluate a model? How can I test? What is the best model for my use case, for example? And finally, how can I build my application with the LLMs to how I can deploy that application? So Podman AI Lab is really about targeting the developer who want an easy, guided way to start bringing AI inside of their application. Without teasing too much of the demo, we are providing a recipe catalog to help the developer to get inspired by some of the use cases, the key use cases where you can benefit from AI. And those recipes, they are providing guidance on the best practices to integrate AI in an optimal way into an application. They are also Kubernetes ready. We are providing a catalog of models which has been curated in terms of licenses and safety to use. You have the ability to import your own model. You can run the models, and you have playgrounds environment that allows you to interact with the model, to test prompts and things like that. So, yeah, that's what is Podman AI Lab. A long description, right?
Well, I think it's important context, especially when you look at just how overused the term AI already is. I mean, everything seems to come with AI now, and being able to understand that these general LLMs that are trained on just everything have varying degrees of usability. I mean, things like ChatGPT has made my life as a dungeon master playing D&D so much easier. I can just ask it to create an NPC for me, but that's not going to make an organization any money. Maybe Wizards of the Coast, but I know it makes my life easier. But when you think about applying that to industry specific use cases, like when JJ came onto my personal podcast, and he and I were talking about Instruct Lab, the use case that he mentioned was the legal front. There's constantly there's new end user license agreements. There's new government mandates. There's new industry standards. And I mean, some of these documents are 200, 300, 400 pages long. And I don't know about y'all, but I like to sleep when I'm not working. And so becoming an expert in legalese and being able to understand all the government regulations isn't exactly something I'm trained and wired to do. So what if I as an organization could pull let's take HIPAA for example, the healthcare standards in the United States. What if I could pull in all the HIPAA compliance requirements, pull in all the government regulations around electronic medical records, pull in all the relevant data into a model and train it on that data? Then I can ask then I can ask my AI model with a chatbot, not ChatGPT. That's completely different. But then I could ask my LLM that I'm hosting locally in my data center or on a cloud provider or something. I can ask it these questions about how is my software impacted, and basically let the AI model review these hundreds of pages of documents. like Nate says in the chat, am I going to be sued over this?
Yeah, I think you are touching a very important point. Is that you have all those large language models today that exist, But when you want to apply that to your organization and to your business, you basically need to have experts model. You still want to work with LLMs, but you want to make them expert on a specific domain. It's a combination of multiple experts that are going to provide a lot of value. It's like a team, in fact. It's a software development team where you have different experts, and all of this is coming with. I have an LLM, but how do I make it expert across my specific domain? And I think that's where we have things like InstructLab that are very, very interesting.
So I don't know about you, Eric, but I'm really excited to actually see this in action. Should we jump into the demo and see how this works?
So I have not been more excited for this demo in some time. Poor Cedric has gotten so many Slack messages from me over the last few days because I've been playing with this on my own. So Cedric, why don't you dive into your demo and show me all the things that I've been doing wrong?
Well, Eric, no, this is perfect that you've kind of gone through the flow that we're going to go show here. So just give me a heads up and let me know when the screen is showing to you guys, and we'll go ahead and dive right in.
Yeah, you're good.
Sweet.
You're good.
Okay. So I got the little clickbait for you right here, but in a second before, I want to show you real quick to use Podman Desktop and to try out the AI Lab extension. You can go to podman-desktop.io. You can learn about what the extension does that we'll be showing you live today, and download it for your Windows, your Mac, or your Linux machine. And feel free to give a star to the project as well if you have a second. So that's my quick little shout out before we hop in.
Nice. I like how you just snuck that in.
Yeah, just a little, And Stevan, feel free to hop in wherever as well, because you know the ins and outs, and I'll try to do my best to give you the coolest demo that I can show from Podman Desktop. So I've got the new 5.3 Podman RC coming out here that's running on a Podman machine. So I've configured that here to have some CPU, some GPU, and with the new 5.2 release, we have a new provider that can enable GPU pass-through that we're going to see in the AI Lab today. At the same time, we were talking about, hey, we have these large enterprises, maybe they're having to sort through hundreds of pages of documents. They want to feed that through some type of model to be able to summarize that, extract the key details. The issue is that with a lot of these popular models that you might be able to access pretty easily online, well, you don't exactly know what's happening with your data. We've seen some interesting incidents happen before where data was ingested by an LLM and it was spit out again later on. And so that kind of is the big use case of why you want to work with local models from your machine. And that's what Podman AI Lab essentially allows you to do, to work with Apache 2.0 licensed models that give you a lot of permissions in what you can do with these models in terms of your applications, in terms of where you deploy them, in terms of how you actually use them. And so I think it's really great to start from here to kind of give you an idea of what you can do with some of the catalog of models, but also to be able to import those in GGUF format. So that just comes from Hugging Face, where I can see the amazing repository of 800,000 models here to figure out what is the best model for me, whether it's computer vision, natural language processing, audio, image, and much more.
Well, and quick interjection here. For those that have never heard of this before, first off, it is the most hysterical name ever, and I would love to hear the story. But Hugging Face is to AI as a Docker repo, like Docker Hub is to containers. So you can go out there and 800,000 some odd different types of models. Some of them are focused on generative AI. Some of them are skilled at doing like object recognition within photos. Some of them, like the one I was playing with last night, Cedric, actually is good at listening to audio and then pulling out a transcript for you. So you see this already in a lot of tools like Zoom or Google Meet that can transcribe your meeting and then provide you with the transcript. I'm actually hoping to use one of these models and Podman Desktop to transcribe a lot of my podcasts. That way I can post the transcription as part of the episode as well. And if it works, bring that to something like Rel Presents or into the terminal.
Yeah, I think you just described such a fantastic use case of AI is not only for professional usage, but also like, I have these projects and I want AI to help me with them. And there's so many different models. Sometimes it's so almost overwhelming. And so that's why there's this catalog of curated models for a variety of different use cases. And speaking of different use cases, Stefan, would you like to introduce the recipe catalog?
Yeah, absolutely. So the recipe catalog is really a list of use cases and recipes for each of those use cases, where we are bringing everything you need to start on this use case as a developer. So we will provide source code for the recipe, and we will also package the inference server and all of this. So when you click on the button start, you will have the ability to choose the model that you want to use for the recipe. And when we do that, we will spin up the application. So we will check out the source code of the application, and we will build the different containers that are necessary for it. So the anatomy of a recipe is really about the model server that we are using, and the base images that we are using to run those different components. So all of this is based on UBI images, and they are shaped as Kubernetes objects. So it's already compatible with Kubernetes. They are already ready to be deployed to Kubernetes. So it's really to provide to the developers a way to see how they can build some of the use cases that we are providing. So we have multiple recipes. We have one for chatbot, summarizer, and code generation. And we also have one which is showing RAG as well. And we have some of them which are related to dealing with audio, like the audio to text that you were just mentioning earlier, Eric. Yeah.
We pre-built the summarizer containers that will be inside of that pod. As we mentioned, these are like Kubernetes ready, as in they're already talking within a pod. And we'll show this in action here in a second. I want to show off a funny one, which is the computer vision one. So let me go ahead and start this. As we talked about before, this clones it to my local environment here. So I've got essentially this on my local machine. I can also see the other recipes here that are in this containers organization to kind of understand, what are some other common use cases. And this is not only for just running these as containers within a pod, but we also have, and I'll show you this here in a second. Let's go ahead and start this. But and before I do that, I'll show you that we're not just working with these text models, but we're working with other types of multimodal models, such as this image classifier model that was open sourced by Facebook. So we'll go ahead and build this. And just like that, I've got this running recipe that we have here on my machine. And well, why don't we go ahead and see it in action? So I'll open up the route to this specific recipe that's running. And this is the object detection. So I've got a guy, and he's a little upset. I don't know what he's upset about. But let's say we have users inputting some type of images into our application or our service. We can use a model just like this to be able to really quickly be able to detect items, detect, you know, yeah, whatever it be, maybe cars, a number of things in an item or an area. And because this is all running in containers, I'll show you this here, that we have the source code readily available to understand how this application is working. So we're working with that Red Hat Universal Base Image for Python. We're copying in the requirements.txt. So here we have some to do a pip install and to do a Streamlit run for this object detection. And this is all that's happening is we're connecting to a model that's being served locally on port 8000. We're accepting JSON, and we're essentially inputting an image and returning back what the model thinks is in the image through a detection of base64 encoded boxes and also text from this input. So I think it's really cool that as a developer, I have the perspective of, hey, how's this working behind the scenes, but also really quick iteration because I'm working with containers and maybe I don't have, for example, Python or Streamlit installed. I can run this all within a container and really easily start iterating on this application. So here's my object detection pod. We can see if I make this a little bit bigger that we have within this pod a infra pod, but also the container for a server that's inferencing and our front end. So I think that's pretty cool to see here in this one view and iterate as a developer.
I do like how the model was 99.9% sure that that was actually a person.
Yeah. I think it knows. It didn't know that. I was hoping it would get the rack behind it too. But hey, that's a success in my book.
So we could actually, I'll put my foot in my mouth if I'm wrong, but we could actually give it pictures of server racks and say this is a server rack and train that model so that in the future it would recognize that. Am I correct there?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different tuning techniques for these models. So the one that we're working with here is this Facebook ResNet model that's been trained on 118,000 different images that have been annotated to say, oh, yeah, this is a guy. And that's what's so great about the open source state right now for models is that we have all this work that's been done that can be reused in various ways. And as far as, say, training, if it didn't know what, say, these model racks were, there's techniques such as Dream Booth, where I could essentially take a model like this or Stable Diffusion and teach it what new images are, what new objects are, so that it could be able to detect, hey, this is a person, but this is also a server rack, and be able to work with these models in our applications from the catalog. And so that's a way for image or diffusion models. And then for text-based models and LLMs, such as summarizers or different LLMs used in use cases for legal or insurance or healthcare, that's a great use case for InstructLab, being able to provide a little bit of training data in plain text to be able to train a model. So there's a lot of different techniques right now that are really evolving for these different AI models to be better, right? To enhance their performance, enhance their output. And I think what AI Lab does perfectly is it kind of gives you this place to start from to be able to organize all of our models, all of our applications. And actually, if it works out now, I can show you how to run a model as a service for an existing application that I already have.
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. So back here, we just showed off the recipes. I also want to show you that I can easily see the quantized version of the model. So models typically come in their weights or in this kind of compressed version that's really easy to work with called a GGUF file. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is start this as a model service. So we're going to have this running on port 50101. And when we create this service, maybe Stefan, I think you'd be great to kind of walk through this as it is kind of new.
Yeah, so actually there's two things here that are kind of new. In fact, here you have the infant server that has been started. And you have endpoints, API endpoints. So Cedric, if you click on the button on the URL, the one on the left, yeah, this one, you have actually all the documentation about the endpoints that you can be using when you want to interact with this model. So you can, you have the Swagger UI that allows you to easily see what are all the parameters and how you can easily build the source code of your application. On the other side, if we are getting back into Podman AI Lab.
Yeah, sorry. This is super cool. I haven't used this before. This is great. This is wonderful. Super cool.
We add that just a couple of days ago, so it's fresh.
Nice. Okay, sorry. Yeah, we're back at the model serving.
Yeah. So you see, you have the here. What is also very cool is that you have the client code. So as a developer, if you want to start interacting, you can select the different languages of your application. So maybe it can be curl here, but it can be also Java Quarkus. It can be also Java Longchain and things like that, and Python as well. So we have a lot of different languages that are getting support. So I can take the code here and I can just directly use it inside of my application source code. The other cool thing that we have just introduced, it's the way we run the model locally, is with containers. And you may be aware that having GPU acceleration with the containers on Windows and on Mac is something that is quite challenging. So we've been doing a lot of work to enable the GPU access on Mac. And here, Cedric is actually running it with GPU inference. So that's pretty cool. We've been working on a virtualization stack which is called libkeren, which has been integrated inside of Podman 5.2, and now is getting integrated inside of Podman Desktop. So you can start your Podman environment with this virtualization stack, which gives you access to the GPU acceleration. So here I'm running with a container, but I'm also getting great performances. So that's something that is quite new. We are super excited about it because the bump into performances is quite impressive.
And Stefan, I think now that you kind of talked about it, let's see this in action. So I've been working on a LangChain app, trying to kind of up my skill set a little bit and learn some new tech. So let me open up this. Let's see. I've got an application here that we'll work with. Let's see, and it's a insurance application. So essentially, and I thought it was already running. Okay, here it is. So I believe many of us might be familiar with Quarkus. And so what I'll go ahead and do is I'll just copy over this application.properties and import it here. And this is a pretty simple application in the fact that we've got a kind of backend that's working with LangChain. We've also got a front end based on React. So I've done a Quarkus dev to kind of go and set everything up. What I'm going to go ahead and do here is just change the base URL to this model that's being served locally. So, and it looks like port 8005 might already be used. That's what I was thinking. I might have it running twice. So 1 second. Let me try to see here. Because if I go to localhost, we'll see. We'll see if we can get this working. I would like to try to Let me do a little live debugging here, and we can see this in action, hopefully.
It's live debugging is always the best, right?
Viewers of our channel know very well how much fun live demos can be.
Oh yeah.
So while Cedric is kind of debugging this, I'll add a little commentary here. Over the last couple of days, I mentioned that Cedric has been barraged by a bunch of Slack messages from me because I've been trying this out. I'm like reading at a second grade level here with AI, but downloading and installing the AI extension for Podman Desktop was super easy. I don't think I uninstalled Podman Desktop after our Podman Desktop episode on this show, so I already had that. I just had to add the AI extension. So that was excuse me, that was incredibly easy, followed by just downloading one of the models. I'd heard people talking about Granite and Instruct Lab, so I grabbed that version, pulled that down, started up the model, and from there just went in and started playing with some of the recipes. So I actually had a chatbot up and running within minutes. And that's not having ever deployed AI models or anything ever in my life. So, excuse me, within minutes, I was actually able to interact with a model using basic English. And then one of the other recipes was that audio transcriber I was mentioning. It took a little bit of time. I've got an M2 Mac that I'm running it off of. But if I was dependent upon this for my job, I'd probably upgrade to one of the Apple desktops, or get a really nice NVIDIA GPU or something to put on Fedora. But I mean, it didn't take too much. Yeah, the audio to text application here, and I was able to transcribe one of my audio podcasts. And it needs some cleanup still, but I'm going to post that as part of my episode. So I mean, a couple of pointed questions to Cedric in maybe 30 minutes or so, and I actually had a model that was up and running. Now the next hurdle I have to figure out is with this model, how do I actually get it to retain information that I give it? It's one thing to ask the model, how do I can you give me a summary of this blog and send it a link, and it'll spit it out. But if you're looking to build something, like what I'd like it to do is write some of my episode descriptions, because I get so into the weeds hosting shows like this that I don't necessarily think about all the things that we talked about. I kind of pick out the things I'm most excited about. So having an impartial AI go in and write my descriptions for me, something that would be SEO friendly, would be a huge boon for me. And of course, being able to do it all self-hosted and open source is another thing. I could of course ask ChatGPT, but that's not as cool.
And I think that's a great
looks like
point.
we have a working application, Cedric.
Yeah. So I did some crazy hacking by changing the port by one number, which always seems to fix the deal. But I think that's a great point about, I think there's kind of a conception that AI is going to take jobs or replace our jobs, and I think it's going to enable us to do better and to save time, and I think that's great. Sorry about that. So I want to show you my
laptop's vulnerable at Black Hat. That's not a good sign.
I'm in trouble, guys. I'll show you this kind of last hurrah finale of this demo that we're doing. So I've got my Quarkus application here on the left. A great use case for AI is helping agents in organizations save time in their jobs. So what we've done is we've kind of taken a claim from a user who might have a policy with our insurance organization. It's a lot to read through. What we've done is, first off, we've taken it and extracted some of the key details, date and time, some information that's really important to the case. We've even used AI to identify some of the damage. So some of the different use cases that you see in Podman AI Lab. And what I'm going to do is essentially use this model that's being served locally on the port 50101 to set up this kind of prompt engineering template. So this is going to essentially provide some system information to the model. And we're also going to provide in a variable the summary of the claim and the question that I'm asking from this specific chatbot. So we'll ask a simple question. where did the accident happen? And give it a second. GPU acceleration is on. And we'll start to see this actually, excuse me, with the tokens that are kind of being output from, well, let's see, I might have to refresh it here that I just started it. The tokens that are being output from the model in real time. So here we go. What we did is we passed, it works great, super fast. What we did is we passed in the information, the claim summary, and my question here at the bottom. And this is kind of what's known as prompt engineering, is being able to provide a model all the context that's relevant to the situation, be able to get an answer that's personalized for our specific use case and save time. And I think this is what's really magical with AI, is that it's going to help in so many different ways. And this kind of LangChain example that I have here running on top of Podman AI Lab is kind of a great way for developers to get started, not only from the recipes, but the services to set up playgrounds. And I'll just show this real quick. To test out, say, if I want higher temperature and more creativity for my model's responses, and mess around here as well. So this is kind of, I kind of want to recap what we've been going through. And Stefan, I know you might have some words to say as well.
I think your demo was fantastic. Just want to point out that you are running the dev versions, and the GPU acceleration has not yet been released. It's coming in the upcoming release, probably available next week. So you will see a big bump into the performances, Eric, and you may not need to buy an Apple desktop. You will see. On my side, it's really fast, and Cedric, when you are running the inference server as well, it's quite fast now. So, yeah.
Well, I will save my money, and I'll wait for the new update of Podman Desktop. GPU acceleration. That's going to be a huge game changer for this.
It's going to be great. And Stefan wanted me to highlight one last thing, which is the enhanced Kubernetes mode for Podman Desktop. So what I've done is I've connected my Teams cluster that we're using for development and production. And I've got a view here of my different nodes that are being used, the control planes, the deployments that are actually out there right now. And I can go in, so say I have this insurance application, understand all of the different details about this, and even I could make changes on the fly. So I had an issue with that port 8005. Oh, well, I can't make, it's view only, but I believe with the services, it's possible to kind of make changes on the fly here. So, well, maybe not changes on the fly.
In the deployment, Cedric, you will be able to do that. You can change the replica, for example, or things like that.
Gotcha. Or apply YAML straight to the cluster, which is pretty neat. So I kind of wanted to show this off as we kind of wrap up the AI part and kind of tie that into how AI on Kubernetes is such a great way to have the benefits of containers and consistency, but to do that in a reliable way from local environment here with Podman Desktop and Podman AI Lab to a production cluster like OpenShift AI or in the hybrid cloud. So that's everything I wanted to show with the demo. So back to you guys.
Oh my gosh, I'm so bummed that we're at the top of the hour. This is so cool.
Really cool stuff. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing. That was really cool.
And so Cedric and I think Stefan, you guys are part of the AI business unit here at Red Hat.
I am part of the developer tools organization.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Red Hat's a very tight-knit group, all 21,000 of us hanging out together. So I bring that up to point out to our viewers that Red Hat is taking this very seriously. Science fiction has not been gentle with AI, but I think the line of thinking that companies are developing on right now is a huge boon to, I think of myself as a systems administrator. I look at like Ansible Lightspeed. that will allow you to basically give an AI chat experience a prompt and say, hey, I need an Ansible playbook that does XYZ, and it spits it out there. I can think of two use cases right off the top of my head. One, I'm new to Ansible and I need help understanding how these playbooks are written. Or two, I've written 100 playbooks in my career to deploy, a LAMP stack on top of Linux. I don't want to have to write yet another playbook to do the exact same thing. So if I can just give this thing a prompt, now I'm not automating myself out of a job. I'm using a tool to augment my productivity. And instead of trying to rewrite that playbook for the upteenth time, instead I can get that done quick, get it deployed out to production, and then spend my time learning something new. So there's so much that we can accomplish, and I can think of no company better than Red Hat to work in the open source space, to make AI open source, to make sure that the data stays open source. And Instruct Lab is a huge project. I heard about it in like March, April, and it has just grown like crazy. Actually, I think we heard about it a little earlier than that, but working side by side with IBM Research and Red Hat, all this technology has really grown into a way that we can see some real use cases. And we're looking at how do you apply that on RHEL? How do you apply that with OpenShift, Kubernetes? I mentioned Ansible Lightspeed. So there's just so many different opportunities, both professionally and personally. Like I'm not kidding that making NPCs for playing D&D or other role-playing games can be miserable. But now I just go open a chat window and say, hey, I need an ogre that likes to fight people, and all of a sudden I get this full backstory and pages. It's like, wow, my session prep just got so much easier. So maybe Cedric, you and I make a video on creating a D&D friendly chatbot or something.
Let's make it happen. That sounds great.
So as we wrap up our episode, Brian, do you have any closing thoughts as we kind of go around the horn here?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank both of you. This was, super cool to see. Thanks for all your work on this technology, and looking forward to see what comes in the future.
Thanks for having us.
Thoughts?
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to come on. It was I feel like this was a great time.
Stefan?
Thanks for everything. Thanks for having us. It was really cool to be part of the show today, and yeah, looking forward for next time we will do a live demo of all those cool technologies all together. Maybe there will be a little bit more of Instruct Lab as well, so that can be a nice way to follow up down the line.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you both for joining us. Cedric, thank you for answering my questions at all hours of the day and night. So to throw Cedric under the bus a little bit, he didn't tell us he was going to be live at a conference when we selected this episode for this for this date. So so he showed up and it was like, wait, I recognize that hallway. That's not good. But you only cut out once online on air, so hey.
I'm glad it all went through. Yeah.
So you should go run that update, because I hear things about Black Hat and people hacking into each other's devices. But for those of you that are joining us for the first time, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate you tuning in. Today was pretty typical of a RHEL Presents episode, I think so, Brian. And really excited every 2 weeks to bring you new content. In fact, we'll be back same time, same channel in 2 weeks. Nate will be co-hosting with me. We'll be interviewing Noah Chalaya, better known as the host of the Ask Noah Show. We're going to be talking about building Linux in community. Talk a little bit about his backstory, a little bit about Nate and mine, just because Linux is more than just an operating system. It's more than just an open source license. I wouldn't be who I am or where I am without the Linux community. So really excited to bring Noah on. We'll have a community focus episode here in a couple of weeks. I don't know that we'll have any hands-on demo, but I think the anecdotes and the stories that we'll share will make up for that. But you don't have to wait 2 weeks for new content. In fact, on Friday, Nate and Scott will be live into the terminal. We'll be talking about troubleshooting package updates. So what happens when you run a DNF and then all of a sudden in the middle of a scriptlet, the system reboots? We'll talk about how to overcome those challenges and more. And then one programming note, tomorrow was supposed to be the kickoff of our Up and Running with Red Hat Satellite miniseries. Unfortunately, my co-host, Richard Rios, is stuck in Boston. He's unable to get back home, and so I think he's traveling. I think his flight leaves about 10 minutes after the show was supposed to go live. So it might be a little difficult to demo Red Hat Satellite, but we push that out a week, and we'll bring that full mini-series to you right after that. So definitely plenty of content. Tune in to hear more, and maybe I'll provide an update in a future episode on my home lab AI shenanigans. If not, I actually host the IT Guy Show on my channel, and I also co-host the Fedora podcast. So plenty of content, plenty of information coming out about this topic, and so much more. But in the meantime, if that's not enough, head out to podman-desktop.io and try out Podman Desktop and definitely Podman Desktop AI Lab for yourselves. Until then, on behalf of my co-host, Brian Smith, on behalf of our guests and the entire Red Hat Enterprise Linux team, thank you all for joining us on Red Hat Enterprise Linux Presents, and we will see you next time.